Welcome back to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we're going to examine a case that begins with a truly haunting image. It's November 10th, 1979. A farmer in Caledonia, New York, discovers the body of a young woman, really just a girl, left in a rain-soaked cornfield.
And for 35 years, that's all she was. An image, a forensic sketch, and a nickname. The investigators called her Caledonia Jane Doe, or just Callie Doe.
35 years. It's almost impossible to comprehend that silence, that anonymity was a second crime committed against her, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. The killer didn't just take her life, they stole her name, her story, and in 1979, the system just wasn't equipped to find it again, especially when nobody was officially looking for her. It created this void.
And that's what makes this story so powerful, because in 2015, that void was finally filled. We learned her name, Tammy Jo Alexander.
And that changes everything. Giving her a name didn't solve her murder, not yet, but it gave her back her history.
Exactly. And today we're going to walk through that entire journey. We'll look at Tammy Jo's turbulent life in Florida, the incredible forensic clues she carried with her, things like exotic pollen and a very unique keychain.
We'll also examine the amazing way she was finally identified, which involves citizen sleuths and modern DNA. But the central question, the one that still hangs over Caledonia today, is why, after all this time, her murder remains tragically unsolved.
Let's start at the very beginning of this mystery, the discovery. It's November 10th, 1979 in Caledonia, New York, a small agricultural town, not a place you'd associate with this kind of violence.
Not at all. It's southwest of Rochester, very rural. And a local farmer finds her body in a field right off US Route 20. It was immediately clear this was a homicide.
And a calculated one at that.
Oh, absolutely. She was found in a ditch, but the evidence suggested she wasn't killed there. The violence was swift and brutal. She'd been shot twice.
With what kind of weapon?
A .38 caliber handgun. One shot was just above her right eye. The other was in her back.
The placement of those wounds, it tells a story, doesn't it? What did the forensic teams deduce from that?
They did. The shot above the eye suggests she was taken completely by surprise. Maybe facing her attacker, sitting in a car, perhaps. It was very close range.
And the shot in the back?
That suggests execution. Either she was incapacitated by the first shot and then killed, or she tried to turn and flee. Either way, it's a very specific, controlled sequence of events. It's not chaotic.
And you said she wasn't killed where she was found.
That's right. The investigators believe she was shot near the roadside on Route 20 and then dragged about 30 feet into the cornfield and left there. The killer wasn't trying to bury her, just to dump her, get some distance.
But the weather that night gave the killer a huge unintentional advantage.
A massive one. It had been raining heavily all night and into that morning. For the forensic technology of 1979, that was a disaster.
How so? What did the rain destroy?
Basically everything. It washed away any potential blood spatter that could have told them more about the initial struggle. It turned the ground to mud, erasing footprints, and crucially, it washed away any trace evidence, skin cells, fibers, anything the killer might have left on her or at the scene.
So the investigation was handicapped from the very first minute.
Completely. They had an anonymous victim, her pockets had been turned inside out, so no ID, no wallet, nothing. All they had was a rough age estimate, somewhere between 13 and 19 years old.
And that anonymity became the entire focus of the case for decades, right?
For more than 3 decades, yes. She was buried in the local cemetery as unidentified girl. The Livingston County Sheriff's Office sent her dental records and forensic sketches all over the country.
But nothing came back.
Nothing. And the core problem was so simple, yet so insurmountable back then. If a person isn't reported missing, they're invisible to the system. New York was searching for a Jane Doe, but there was no missing person report anywhere in the U.S. that matched her.
The two pieces of the puzzle were in different states, with no way to connect them.
Exactly. It was an investigative dark age. They were working in the dark until forensic science took a major leap forward years later.
So with the crime scene compromised, all they had to go on were the things she was found with. Her clothes, her personal effects.
Yes, and those items were telling a very specific story. She was dressed for the cold November weather in upstate New York tan, corduroy jeans, a plaid shirt, a man's red windbreaker.
But there was a contradiction, wasn't there?
A huge one. She had very distinct tan lines, the kind you'd get from wearing a halter top or a bikini. You don't get those tan lines in New York in the fall.
So she was a traveler. She'd recently been somewhere warm, somewhere in the Sun Belt.
That was the immediate conclusion. It was the first clue that her story started hundreds, maybe thousands of miles away.
What else did they find on her?
A few small things. A silver ring with a floral design, a watch. But the most important clue, the item that became the symbol of the case for years, was a locket keychain.
Let's talk about this locket. It sounds so specific.
It really is. It was a two-piece set. One part was a silver heart with an inscription engraved on it.
What did it say?
It said, "He who holds the key can open my heart." The second piece was the little key that fit into the heart.
Wow. That's strangely poetic for a piece of evidence in a murder case.
It is. But the crucial part wasn't just the locket itself, it was where it came from. Investigators tracked down the manufacturer, and they found out these specific keychains were sold in vending machines. And those vending machines were located almost exclusively at rest stops along the New York State Thruway.
Okay, so that's a huge geographical pan. She was traveling north, and she, or the person she was with, was on the main highway that cuts across New York State.
Precisely. It confirmed her route of travel. It took the vague idea of she came from the south and put her on a specific major interstate right before she was killed.
But still, even with the tan lines and the locket, the search area was enormous. They needed something more.
They did. And they wouldn't get it until 2006 when a fairly new forensic science was applied to her case.
This is the part I find absolutely incredible. The pollen analysis. Can you walk us through what forensic palynology is?
Of course. Forensic palynology is the study of pollen and spores in a legal investigation. Pollen grains are microscopic, but they're also incredibly durable, and they're unique to specific plants and geographic regions. They get everywhere, on your clothes and your hair.
So in 2006, they went back to her clothes, which had been in an evidence locker for over 25 years?
They did. They analyzed her corduroy jeans and the windbreaker, and what they found was a massive concentration of pollen from a very specific tree.
Which was?
The casuarina tree. It's also known as the Australian pine.
And why was that so important?
Because the casuarina tree is a subtropical plant. It cannot survive the freezing temperatures of a New York winter. It grows in places like Florida, Southern California, and Southern Georgia.
So this is a scientific proof.
This was the biological smoking gun. The pollen proved with absolute certainty that she had been in a warm southern climate very, very shortly before her death. It turned the circumstantial clue of her tan lines into hard science.
It narrowed the search from somewhere in the U.S. to a few specific states.
It was a game changer. It confirmed she was a long-distance traveler and gave investigators a much smaller area to focus on. But they still didn't have a name.
Which brings us to the most tragic part of the story. Why she remained unidentified for so long. Who was Tammy Jo Alexander?
She was a 16-year-old girl from Brooksville, Florida. And sadly, she had a very troubled home life and a history of running away.
Her life in Florida is key to understanding the whole mystery.
It is. She lived near a major truck stop, and she often hitched rides with long-haul truckers. It was a pattern for her. When she disappeared in the summer of 1979, her family, well, they made an assumption.
They assumed she'd just run off again.
They assumed she was safe, that she just started a new life somewhere, maybe staying with friends or a trucker she knew. And because of that assumption, they never filed a missing person report.
That's the missing piece. The one action that could have solved her identity in 1979 never happened.
It's the cruelest irony. The very circumstances that put her in danger, her transient lifestyle, were the same circumstances that kept her invisible to law enforcement after she was killed. Without that report, there was no record for the New York investigators to find.
So let's jump forward in time. We go from 2006, when they had the pollen, all the way to 2014, what finally broke the case open.
It wasn't a piece of evidence, it was people. Her half-sister, Pamela Dyson, and a high school friend, Laurel Noel, started talking. They realized that after all those years, nobody had ever officially reported Tammy Jo missing.
So they finally did it.
In August of 2014, they went to the authorities in Florida and filed the report. 35 years late, but it was the key that unlocked everything.
How did that one report connect to a cold case 1,000 miles away?
Because of a modern tool called NamUs. That's the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It's a public online database where law enforcement can upload information about missing people and unidentified remains.
And anyone can search it.
Anyone. And that's where the next hero of this story comes in. A citizen sleuth, an artist named Carl Koppelman. He spent his free time trying to match Jane and John Doe's with missing persons on Namath.
So he saw the new listing for Tammy Jo Alexander.
He did. He was familiar with the forensic sketches of Caledonia Doe, and when he saw the description and photos of the missing girl from Florida, he saw a striking resemblance. He was the one who made the connection.
An ordinary person sitting at his computer bridged a 35-year-old gap that law enforcement couldn't. That's incredible.
It's the power of crowdsourcing justice. He flagged the potential match for the authorities, and they moved on it immediately.
And they had her DNA, right?
Yes. Fortunately, investigators in New York had the foresight to exhume her remains and extract a viable DNA sample back in 2005. So they took a sample from her half-sister, Pamela.
And it was a match.
A perfect match. On January 26, 2015, 35 years and 77 days after she was found, Caledonia Jane Doe was finally identified as Tammy Jo Alexander.
It must have been such a mix of emotions for the family. Relief, but also profound grief.
Absolutely. The uncertainty was over, but the terrible truth of what happened to her was finally real.
And for the Livingston County Sheriff's Office, the investigation completely changed.
It pivoted entirely. The question was no longer, who is she? It became, who killed her? The case transformed into the largest criminal investigation in the county's history.
But they were starting with a 40-year-old trail. That must have been incredibly difficult and open to a lot of misinformation.
Oh, it was. And the case had already been derailed once before. Back in the 1980s, the infamous serial killer Henry Lee Lucas confessed to her murder.
But Lucas confessed to hundreds of murders, didn't he?
He did, and most of them were proven to be false. His confession in this case wasted years of investigative time and resources before it was ultimately discredited. It's a classic example of how a high-profile case can attract false leads that do incredible damage.
So, with the investigation refocused in 2015, what are the current active leads?
They're looking at a few key things. There are tips that connect her to a Georgia-based prison ministry. It's plausible she could have encountered someone from that group while traveling.
But the biggest lead has to be forensic, right?
It is. This is the most promising part of the current investigation. Investigators managed to recover a viable sample of male DNA from her clothing.
Even after all that time and after the rain.
It's remarkable, but yes, that male DNA profile does not belong to anyone in her family or any known contacts so far. It almost certainly belongs to her killer.
So now it's a matter of finding a match for that DNA.
Exactly. They've taken DNA samples from numerous men in Florida who knew her or were around the truck stops at that time. They're trying to find a match the old-fashioned way, but also looking at forensic genealogy. And the FBI has a $20,000 reward out for information.
That reward says they believe someone out there knows something.
It says they believe the case is solvable. They just need that one final tip, that one name to match to the DNA.
Okay, so with a case this long and with so many unknowns, the internet has obviously had a field day. What are the big theories that online communities discuss about her killer?
The dominant one, by far, is the long-haul trucker theory. It just fits the known facts so well.
Right. Her history of hitchhiking, the truck stop connection, the huge distance traveled.
And the dump site. A rural road like Route 20 is a classic choice for a transient killer. It's easy to get off the main highway, dispose of a body, and get back on the road with very little chance of being seen.
But there are people who argue against the random trucker theory.
There are. That leads to the acquaintance theory. The argument here focuses on the murder itself. The two-shot method feels targeted, almost personal, not like a random, chaotic attack.
And the fact that her pockets were emptied.
Exactly. A stranger might not bother, but someone who knew she was a runaway might deliberately remove her ID to buy themselves more time, knowing she wouldn't be reported missing right away. It suggests a killer with some knowledge of her circumstances.
It's a subtle distinction, but a really important one.
It is. And then, of course, you have the theories connecting her to other crimes, the serial offender theories.
Do any of those hold water?
Not according to law enforcement. Online sleuths love to connect dots between cases, especially with hitchhiker murders in the 70s. But the FBI and local police have said there are no concrete forensic matches linking her case to any other known serial killer.
Beyond the killer, there's also a lot of online discussion about her family and why she wasn't reported missing.
It's a sensitive topic, but a necessary one. While some people are critical, the general consensus is that her family situation was just complicated. It was a different era, and their assumption that she was alive but just gone wasn't born from malice, but from a pattern of behavior they were used to. It was a tragic miscalculation.
And her story has really become symbolic, hasn't it?
It really has. She's become a symbol for all the unidentified victims, the Jane and John Does who fall through the cracks of the system. Her case is a powerful argument for why centralized databases like NamUs are so vital.
There's also the legacy she left in the town of Caledonia.
I think that's one of the most moving parts of this story. For 35 years, that community cared for her. They held vigils, they tended her grave, they adopted her as their own. That sustained emotional investment kept her memory alive and put continuous pressure on law enforcement to not let her become just another cold case file.
So when we pull back and look at the whole picture, we have this huge breakthrough in 2015. Her identification was a massive victory for forensic science.
A monumental one. It showed the power of combining modern DNA technology like familial matching with the relentless work of citizen sleuths. It gave her back her name and her dignity.
But that leads to the ultimate irony of the case. We have this incredible breakthrough, but we don't have resolution.
That's the painful truth of it. We know who she was, we know where she came from, we even know her exact route of travel thanks to the pollen in the locket, but we still don't know who killed her or why. The technology solved the identity, but it hasn't solved the crime.
In trying to reconstruct those final days now, 40 years later, seems almost impossible.
It's incredibly difficult. Memories fade, witnesses move away or pass away. The world of 1979 is gone. That's why the physical evidence, the male DNA on her clothing, is so critical.
Yeah.
It's the one witness that doesn't forget.
So given all that, is stranger violence still the leading theory for investigators?
It has to be. While the acquaintance theory has merit, the simplest explanation is often the most likely. A young, vulnerable girl hitchhiking across the country meets the wrong person. It's a tragic but all too common story. The dump site, the lack of connection to New York, it all points to a transient killer who picked her up on the road.
This case carries so much emotional weight. For her family, who lived with uncertainty for so long, and for the investigators who carried her file for their entire careers.
It does. You have investigators who retired never knowing her name, and then you have her family who had to process the grief of her death decades after they thought she was just living a different life. It's a complex, layered tragedy.
What do you think is the biggest cultural lesson from Tammy Jo's story?
I think it's a stark reminder that technology can only do so much. Her case highlights how crucial basic police procedure and interagency communication are. The failure was a human one, a systemic one. Her story forced a lot of agencies to rethink how they handle missing children, especially runaways, to make sure a 35-year gap like this never happens again. As you think about this case, just consider the contrast. Her identity was finally found using the most advanced science we have: forensic genealogy, DNA analysis, things that were pure science fiction in 1979. But the reason she was lost for so long comes down to the simplest human failure. A missing persons report was never filed. The science was brilliant, but it was only needed because a simple piece of paper was missing from the system.
Tammy Jo Alexander finally has her name back. Yeah, but the questions of who, why, and when he'll be caught still linger heavy in the cornfields of Caledonia. Next time on Threads of Truth, we examine the tragic and controversial death of Rebecca Zaho, a case filled with contradictions, shocking visuals, and a decade of debate over what really happened inside the Spreckles mansion.